Chapter 12. I waited for August in her room. Waiting was a thing I had done tons of experience doing. Waiting for the girls at school to invite me somewhere, for T-Ray to change his ways, for the police to show up and drag us off to the Everglades prison, for my mother to send a sign of love. Zach and I hung around outside till the daughters of Mary finished in the honey house. We'd helped them clean up the mess in the yard, me stacking plates and cups and Zach folding up card tables. Queenie had smiled and said, "How come you two left before we finished?" "It got too long," said Zach. "So that's what it was," she teased, and Cressy giggled. When Zach left, I slipped back into the honey house and retrieved my mother's photograph and her Black Mary picture from underneath my pillow. Clutching them in my hands, I glided past the daughters as they finished up the dishes in the kitchen. They called to me, "Where you going, Lily?" I hated to be rude, but I found I couldn't answer, couldn't speak a word of idle talk. I wanted to know about my mother. I didn't care about anything else. I marched straight into August's room, a room filled with the smell of beeswax. I switched on a lamp and sat on the cedar chest at the end of her bed, where I folded and unfolded my hands 8 or 10 times. They were cool, damp, with a mind of their own. All they wanted to do was fidget and pop knuckles. I stuck them under my thighs. The only other time I'd been in August's room was the time I'd fainted during the Daughters of Mary meeting and awakened in her bed. I must have been too muddled then to see it, because it all seemed new to me. You could have wandered around in this room for hours and had a field day looking at stuff. For starters, everything was blue. Bedspread, curtains, rug, chair, cushion, lamps. Don't get the idea it was boring, though. She had 10 different shades of it. Sky blue, lake blue, sailor blue, aqua blue, you name a blue. I had the feeling of scuba diving through the ocean. On her dressing table, where less interesting people would have put a jewelry box or a picture frame, August had a Finnish aquarium turned upside down and a giant piece of honeycomb inside it. Honey had oozed out and formed puddles on the tray underneath. On her bedside table were beeswax candles melted down into brass holders. I wondered if they could be the ones I'd personally created. It gave me a little thrill to think so, how I had helped to light August's room when it was dark. I walked over and inspected the books, neatly arranged on her bookshelf. The Advanced Language of Beekeeping, Apiary Science, Bee Pollination, Bullfinch's Age of Fable, The Myths of Greece, The Cultivation of Honey, Bee Legends Around the World, Mary Through the Ages. I pulled the last one of the shelf and opened it across my lap, thumbing through the pictures. Sometimes Mary was brunette and brown-eyed, and other times blonde and blue-eyed, but gorgeous every time. She looked like a Miss America contestant, a Miss Mississippi. You can usually count on the girls from Mississippi to win. I couldn't help wishing to see Mary in a swimsuit with heels, before her pregnancy, of course. The big shock, though, was all the pictures of Mary being presented with a lily by the angel Gabriel. In every one where he showed up to tell her she was going to have a baby of babies, even though she wasn't married yet, he had a big white lily for her, as if this was the consolation prize for the gossip she was in for. I closed the book and put it back on the shelf. A breeze moved through the room from the open window. I walked to it and stared out at the dark fringe of trees by the edge of the woods, a half-moon wedged like a gold coin into a slot, about to drop through the sky with a clink. Voices flittered through the screen. Women voices. They rose in chirps and melted away. The daughters were leaving. I twisted my hair with my fingers, walked around the throw rug in circles, the way a dog would do before it settles on the floor. I thought about the prison movies in which they're about to electrocute some prisoner, wrongly convicted, of course. The camera going back and forth between the poor man sweating in his cell block and the clock creeping towards 12. I sat down on the cedar chest again. Footsteps landed on the floorboard. In the hallway, precise, unhurried steps. August steps. I sat up straighter. taller, my heart starting to beat so I could hear it in my ears. When she stepped into the room, she said, "I thought I might find you here." I had the desire to bolt past her through the door, dive out the window. "You don't have to do this," I told myself, but the wanting rose up. I had to know. "Remember when—" I said. My voice came out barely a whisper. I cleared my throat. "Remember when you said we should have a talk?" She closed the door, a sound so final. "No turning back," it said. "This is it," it said. I remember it very well. I laid out the photograph of my mother on the cedar chest. August walked over and picked up the picture. "You are the spitting image of her." She turned her eyes on me, her flickering eyes, with the copper fire inside them. I wish I could look out at the world through them just one time. "It's my mother," I said. "I know, honey. Your mother was Deborah Fontanelle Owens." I looked at her and blinked. She stepped towards me, and the yellow lamplight glazed her eyes so I could no longer make out her eyes. I shifted my position so I could see them better. She dragged the chair from her dressing table over to the cedar chest and sat down facing me. "I'm so glad you're finally going to talk about this." I could feel her knee barely touching mine. A full minute passed without either of us saying a word. She helped the picture, and I knew she was waiting for me to break the silence. "You knew she was my mother all along?" I said, uncertain whether I felt anger or betrayal, or just plain surprise. She placed her hand on mine and brushed her thumb back and forth across my skin. "The first day you showed up, I took one look at you, and all I could see was Deborah when she was your age. I knew Deborah had a daughter, but I thought, no, you couldn't be. It was too much to believe that Deborah's daughter would turn up in my parlor. Then you said your name was Lily, and right that minute I knew who you were. Probably I should have expected this. I felt tears gather in the back of my throat, and I didn't even know why. But, you never said a word. How come you didn't tell me?" "Because you weren't ready to know about her. I didn't want you risk running away. I wanted you to have a chance to get yourself on solid ground, get your heart bolstered up first. There's a fullness of time for things, Lily. You have to know when to prod and when to be quiet, when to let things take their course. That's what I had been trying to do. I grew so quiet. How could I be mad at her? I had done the same thing, held back what I knew. My reasons were not the least bit noble like hers. "May told me," I said. "May told you what?" "I saw her making a trail of graham crackers and marshmallows for the roaches to follow. My father told me once that my mother used to do the same thing. I figured she learned it from May. So I asked her, 'Did you ever know Deborah Fontanelle?' And she said yes, she did, that Deborah had stayed in the honey house." August shook her head. "Goodness, there's so much to tell you. You remember how I told you I worked as a housekeeper back in Richmond before I got my teaching job? Well, that was in your mother's house." My mother's house? It seemed odd to think of her with a roof over her head, a person who lay on a bed, ate food at a table, took bathtubs.